So I want to talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 boycott and why, at least at this point, it has failed. And if you're confused, then I don't blame you, because for a lot of people out there, maybe even people watching this channel, you didn't even realize there was a boycott going on for Switch 2. It's pretty wild, actually, to think about how much I'm aware of this attempted boycott of Nintendo Switch 2 and thus Nintendo themselves, and how little some people were aware of it. And that is something we're going to dive into, because there are certain key things that have to happen for a boycott to be successful. And I want to talk about why this boycott appears, at least so far, to have not been successful, what could have been done differently to potentially make it be successful, and of course, just talk about why it failed in general and some of the backlash and repercussions of this failure that seems to be permeating all over the internet. So before we dive in, I just want to remind you, we are giving away 5 copies of Kirby Air Riders for Nintendo Switch 2. I know, ironic, right? That being said, you can enter down in the link in the pinned comment or the description. And folks, you can, subscribe to the channel if you so choose. We're on our road to 160,000 subscribers. Okay, so let's dive into what's going on. So first off, was there a Nintendo Switch 2 boycott? Well, if you're on the internet and you are on Reddit, you're on Twitter, you're in comment sections on YouTube and stuff, absolutely there seemed to be a boycott. And what is a boycott? What makes it a boycott effective? Well, before we dive into that, let's talk about what people were mad about, right? So essentially, people wanted to boycott Nintendo, the company, over Switch 2 for a few key reasons. One, they wanted to boycott because they felt like the price of Nintendo Switch 2 was too expensive. Two, they felt the price of Mario Kart World was too expensive at $80, and they didn't want that precedent to be set. And three, they felt like some of Nintendo's policies are extremely anti-consumer, namely things like being able to, quote-unquote, brick your system. It is something in their TOS that they can do, but technically haven't done yet. But then also just in general, the ways in which they can ban systems and all of this stuff, and game key cards, throwing that on top as well. I know you can argue if that's a policy or not, but regardless, people don't like game key cards either, because it's just another form of digital and it's not full physical games. So you combine all of this together, and look, there's some nuances in there. People are basically going against Nintendo because they feel like they are being extremely anti-consumer with the price points and with the policies and the game key card situation. So when we throw all that together, that's the crux. That is the foundation of the boycott. Hey, do not buy Switch 2. Do not buy the accessories. Do not buy the games. Don't buy any of this stuff, because we need to send Nintendo a message that we will not accept these policies and these prices. All right, now let's talk about what makes for an effective boycott. All right, in order for a boycott to be effective, it has to be done in a way where it is something that people want, but they are standing on principle to not buy. As an example, there's been many boycotts in the past that have actually worked. Some of the laws and policies in the very country I live in, the United States, have actually been formed due to boycotts. Things like dealing with racism and sexism and all sorts of things have had literal impacts in the law due to boycotts, because people wanted something but weren't being allowed to have it, or they refused to get that something because it was denying other people. Those are obviously social issues. We're talking about video games. So for a video game boycott to be successful, one, it has to not just spread, not just awareness spread, but it has to be led by people that legitimately want to buy a Switch 2 in the first place. So in order for a boycott to work, the people that are organizing it, the people that are rallying the troops, have to first be Nintendo fans. They would have to be people who are really excited for Switch 2, really want to play Switch 2, really want to buy the games on Switch 2, but because of the price points, because of the policies, because of the key cards all combined together, you are collectively deciding not to do so in order to send a message to that company. When a boycott is led by people who had no plans of buying the product in the first place, you actually end up not having much of an impact at all, because your message isn't going to land with people who are planning to buy the system. You need people who were planning to buy it, who wanted to buy it, to lead the movement. That's really how this works, because otherwise you're just having a bunch of people that were never buying the system anyways, rah-rahing out there about how bad Nintendo is, but they weren't going to buy the system anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Their impact is next to nothing. And this is the crux of why the Nintendo Switch 2 boycott has seemingly failed. If you think about some of the biggest names out there leading the charge for boycotts, you have people like, some ordinary gamers who, hey, he bought a Switch 2. He was pushing for a boycott, and he literally bought a Switch 2 day one. Again, doesn't work if the leaders also buy the system anyways. You can't have a boycott happen if the leader themselves is not actually spearheading that boycott and sticking to their word. So that was a bad take. But then you think some of the other ones, some of the more nuanced ones out there. You think of some of the content creators leading the charge. People like, oh no, it's Alex. He literally was never going to buy a Switch 2 regardless. He doesn't really play Switch either. Everything he plays is on PC. So he wasn't going to buy the system regardless of what happened, right? So that's not someone that's great to lead the charge, because you can't boycott something you weren't planning to buy anyways. You're not affecting anything. So we got to go to other people out there that were maybe planning to get it. Maybe someone like Nintendine. He's another content creator, but he really wasn't spearheading the boycott stuff from the very beginning. So yes, he is a Nintendo fan who loved Switch, bought Switch, owned all the games. That's actually an example of somebody who could potentially have been a leader for the movement, but I don't feel like he in particular wants to step up in that regard. Then you have other people like Fratanga Plays. You have other people out there like smaller content creators. You have lots of people on Reddit and Twitter, lots of people that were pushing for this boycott. But the problem, the fundamental issue is all of the leadership behind this movement was disjointed, unorganized, and nobody was really working together. For a boycott to actually work, there needs to be organization, and it needs to be led by people who actually legitimately want to buy the product. Because if the entire purpose of you boycotting something is just to say, F the corporations, that's fine, but that's not going to work when you're not actually the consumer base of the actual product. So if it's a bunch of people screaming at each other that were never buying the products in the first place, it's not going to be effective. Just to give you an example, when I was waiting in line at GameStop for my personal system and just talking to lots of other fans out there, they weren't even aware a boycott was happening. In fact, when I mentioned this in this video, there's some of you guys watching this video right now that wasn't even aware a boycott was occurring. This is because what happens is we get stuck on the internet where we watch certain types of content or we consume certain types of things, and then algorithms and other things only feed you those things that you were searching for and or looked into. And because of that, the movement seems much bigger than it really is, when it's really just a small little pocket on the internet that overall isn't impacting the larger methodology out there. So that is one reason why, yes, there was a boycott, but no, it actually was quite small. It really wasn't going to have any effect anyways. Now, even if that movement got more traction and was sung from high praises by all the biggest content creators out there, it probably still would have failed. And the fundamental reason it would have failed is that the people latching onto the movement started fighting with actual consumers of the products. And herein lies the issue. And this is why we're seeing some people, every time Nintendo announces sales data, like it's the fastest selling system of all time and all that stuff, you'll see people being out there, oh, the boycott failed. Oh, look, like I said, boycott didn't do anything. Like they're kind of mocking people who were quote unquote boycotting the platform. And the reason they're doing that is because fans that were excited for Switch 2 knew about the policies but wanted to buy everything anyways. They were being mocked and they were being attacked by the boycotting movement. And this is because the boycotting movement wasn't actually being led by people who are fans of Nintendo. It was being led by people who literally don't buy or play the platforms anyways. So what happened is a lot of these content creators and a lot of people that follow these content creators felt compelled to attack the consumer rather than the company. And for a boycott to be effective, for you to grow and gain ground, it can't be something that's actually attacking other people. It has to be attacking the problem. If you think Nintendo's prices are the problem, you can't turn around and be like, well, this content creator is the problem because they're okay with the prices. It doesn't matter if they're okay with the prices. That's not the point. It's the company setting the prices. It's the company setting the precedent. The movement has to be against that stuff at the company, not against somebody else who maybe doesn't mind that stuff, isn't bothered by it enough, and is still going to buy the product anyways. Actually, your goal should be to try to win those people over. The very people you need to win a boycott are going to be the staunchest, biggest fans. And if you don't win them over and instead go on the attack and name call and all this stuff, you've already lost the plot. And this is really the core structure of why the boycott failed. Wasn't very large to begin with. The people behind it, for the most part, the figureheads of the boycott, either bought the system anyways or were never planning to buy the system regardless, making them irrelevant to the entire boycott conversation. And then besides all that, they actually oftentimes went on the attack and were attacking consumers and attacking content creators instead of attacking the company. And when I say attack, it's not even the right way to go about it. You have to have a clear purpose. You don't want these policies, you don't want these prices, so you will not buy their products until they cave. But the problem is you need to be working to convince other people to join your movement rather than going on the offensive. And when you go on the offensive, what you end up doing is alienating the very base of people you need for your boycott to work in the first place. So, why did the Switch 2 boycott fail? I think it's quite obvious. It's a convoluted mess of crap that needs to all come together to really form the whole picture. It was led by the wrong people. It wasn't a very big movement in the first place. Most consumers were never aware of it. Most consumers are still not aware of the problems besides price. And when you throw it all together, they were busy attacking. The leaders of the movement were busy attacking fellow content creators instead of trying to convince those content creators to come to their side. And the problem is the core of the movement was being led by people that don't buy and consume the products anyways, or do like some ordinary gamers, but then went out and bought the product day one anyways, defeating the entire purpose of the boycott. So yeah, this is just a very convoluted thing that has a real simple response. It failed because the right people weren't in charge of it, and too many people were busy arguing on the internet instead of trying to convince people that this is the right thing to do. Now, do I think this movement would have ever got off the ground personally? No, I do not. And I'm not someone who says boycotts are pointless, they never work. Yes, they haven't worked a hell of a lot in the video game space, but there are examples where boycotts have worked, where backlash has made a difference. Overall, it usually doesn't in the video game industry, but that's because it's not a well-organized movement most of the time. And that's really the problem. There are a lot of people out there who just strongly dislike Nintendo for many different reasons and literally do not buy their products or consume them, at least in legal ways. And because of that, they latched on to all these negative things and tried to become basically the leader of this anti-Nintendo, do not buy Switch 2 movement, when unfortunately for them, you're not going to win over people when you are someone yourself that literally just doesn't like anything Nintendo does. For a boycott to be effective, I'm not even saying I'm the right person. It would have to be like beat 'em ups and Scott the Woz, and those large creators would have to get together and start reaching out to other creators, start reaching out to other people, and start to really spread this massive movement online to make that difference. And when those creators don't agree with the boycott, it ain't going anywhere. And yelling at them and mocking them, and let's just be frank, mocking me isn't really going to do anything. I said this at the time on a live stream that they were going about this all wrong. I actually don't like Nintendo's policies. I don't like the price points. I actually agree with a lot of the criticism. However, I am willing to put up with enough of this stuff at this point to still enjoy the product. For a movement to work, you need people to feel like they've hit that breaking point. And some of you have, and there are definitely some Nintendo fans that hit that breaking point. But is this enough that that breaking point was really widespread? So far, the answer is no. So the Switch 2 boycott failed because there probably really wasn't a boycott to begin with. At this point, near as I can tell, it was just a bunch of people screaming at Nintendo fans and trying to tell us how evil we are for wanting to buy something like this. I can't think of a single boycott that's ever worked when the goal is to attack others instead of attacking the issues. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next video.